those other states of being, like that fundamentally we somehow know that like this human isn't all of who we are. As I've grown spiritually, I've learned that like, oh, I can choose to awaken through joy. Like I don't always have to choose that sort of like that resistant suffering. Yeah, and so much of our human conditioning, which is really like, it's the mind, it's the mentality, kind of like you said, like we create with our imagination. Isn't that the definition of awakening right there, is like becoming conscious of what you will give your power to.
The power you seek lies within you, as we are each infinite beings living a human experience. The truth of who and what we are has been hidden from us until now. Awaken, my friends, to this new reality that we are in fact creating everything through the power and the gift of our wonderful imagination. Join me as I unlock the secrets of our past and reveal the truth that has been clouded in this veil we call life. What reality will you choose to create today? The choice is yours. Welcome, my friends, to My Reality Practice. Hello and welcome, everybody, and thanks for joining in today for the Reality Practice podcast. Today's guest is Kristin Fraizer Johnston. Kristin is an artist, a visionary, and an expert in the field of energy medicine. She's also a certified yoga instructor, hypnotist, Reiki master, teacher, and co-owner of Quantum Health and Wellness in Seekonk, hope I said that right, Massachusetts. After graduating from the Rhys Thomas Institute of Energy Medicine in 2013, a profound and life-altering experience with a powerful plant-based medicine expanded her awareness of her own reality and revealed to her the purpose behind her life. Since then, she's been on a mission to help others awaken their spirituality, expand their consciousness, and create the lives they truly desire. She recently just released her first book titled Heal the People, Expanding Human Consciousness for a Global Awakening, that is serving as a guide for all of those awakening during this pivotal moment in human history. So without further delay, let's give a huge and warm welcome to my friend Kristin. Welcome to the Reality Practice podcast. I'm so excited to have you here today. I can't wait to just dive into all of this stuff.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored to be here.
Yeah, no, I think we're honored to be able to share your knowledge and to absorb some of what you've learned along the way. Your journey sounds like hasn't been easy, and I find that's pretty standard for those of us that have awoken to this, mission, this purpose in our life. It's something just kind of clicks, and it typically starts with early childhood. Some traumatic things happen to us that we don't understand then. And then all of a sudden, something brings that out, some revelation, some moment. And it's like, boom, we see the whole picture. We see why it all happened and what the purpose of it all was for. So, can you share kind of your journey previously to having this moment of awakening during this plant medicine retreat? It sounds like you went on, but prior to that, where were you? What was going on? And what was that catalyst other than the medicine itself, that I would say opened the door to start receiving that information? It was the facilitator of it, but what led up to that moment when it was just like, boom, you got the download and you're like, my life is now, I see what I must do. So yeah. I'd love to hear this. Please share.
So yeah, that's a fantastic question. And actually, like, my awakening process had kind of started before the plant medicine too. I can't even remember exactly what it was. I can't really pinpoint it wasn't exactly one thing. I think it was always sort of like the nature of my soul too. Like I remember asking these deep questions. Even when I was a kid, I was very curious about, like the afterlife and reincarnation. And even as a child, I remember asking my parents, like, where did we come from before here?
I love that. I was, not to interrupt you, I mean, I was the same way. Like at 10 years old, I'm watching every show, which there wasn't as many back in the day, but I'm watching like every show I can possibly find on aliens, on afterlife, on, ghosts. I mean, just the whole spectrum, because for me, that all just seemed right. I didn't know, but it's like, this just makes sense. There's got to be more to it. So
Yeah,
I didn't interrupt you, but I think a lot of us have that feeling, that knowing, but we just don't know, right?
yeah, I think it's like fundamental to the soul. Like there's so many facets to us as humans, and sort of I think the soul is naturally connected to those, those other states of being. Like that fundamentally we somehow know that like this human isn't all of who we are. And I think that curiosity, some of us are just more curious or even more rebellious. I know for me, like I was kind of rebellious. Like I couldn't just accept what I was told. I always had to question it. I always had to find out what felt right for me and what was truthful and honest for me. So that kind of led me down a path of seeking, and it led me down some paths of seeking in the wrong ways, or maybe harmful ways. I can't say they were wrong, because they all paths lead us somewhere,
Right.
whether it's lessons or,
Right. I don't think there is a wrong path. It's simply the path we must take at that moment to get us to awaken to what we need to learn and evolve to, so it's just that never ending game where we're on it, but it's just one step at a time, and we can't rush it. The more we try to rush it, the more frustrated we get, because it works opposite, right?
Yeah, and some paths are more painful. You'll find out as you grow that like, oh, some paths are more painful than others, and they can all lead to awakening, right? Like if that's what we're after, is sort of these awakening to higher levels of consciousness, suffering can definitely bring about awakening, but so can joy. And so I think like I've kind of, as I've grown spiritually, I've learned that like, oh, I can choose to awaken through joy. Like I don't always have to choose that sort of like that resistant suffering. But yeah, so the path of awakening kind of started out painful, and it, I was trying to find those elevated states of consciousness. And, anyone who's had experiences with mind altering substances knows that they can be very liberating. When, you ingest something and all of a sudden, like your fear goes away, or those lower fields of energy are silenced, and you experience these higher dimensions. It can be very addictive, so I think when I was like really young, I was getting addicted to those states. To me now, I understand that they're spiritual states. They really are. When you're free from fear, or you're free from those lower vibrations, and that addiction actually, like it led into a pretty serious addiction, was the catalyst to start really spiritual seeking, like to try to free myself from that experience too. And that led me to like the self-help section in Borders bookstore, where I was introduced to books like The Secret, and I ended up going to an energy medicine mystery school, the Rhys Institute, which sort of really catapulted my spiritual growth. And so it wasn't like I just had an experience with plant medicine and I was like, holy
Right.
like, oh my God, this is my life purpose. My curiosity had already started peeling back those layers. And then the plant medicine just really kind of like drove it home.
I think that's the power of these plant medicines. Ayahuasca, which was the one you said that you did back in 2013.
So I did ibogaine. It's an African okay. plant root.
I saw it. I didn't know how to pronounce it, so I was like, I was just going to wait and let you explain.
Yeah, so some people call it iboga, but it's the medicine that I used was ibogaine, and so it's known for its its addiction interruption properties. So yeah, I used it specifically for the intention of
that addiction, that addictive behavior that had been programmed inside you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I didn't, the power, that's what I was getting at though, with that power of the plant-based medicine. It isn't the cause of the awakening. It's simply a portal. It opens a portal. It opens a part of us that can connect, to that spirit, to the nothingness, to whatever we're supposed to receive at that moment. When we're ready, the answers will come to us. So I feel like that is such a great facilitator, to understanding that deeper level of consciousness. I'm trying, my goal is to plan a retreat if I, this year down, hopefully sometime in September, if I go by myself at this point, or if I can get an actual retreat together with other people and try and get down to Peru and do my first ayahuasca ceremony. So, and do like a 10-day retreat or whatever. So that's off subject, but I'm so excited to journey down that path, because that's kind of I told my wife last week, I'm like, I was given some signs, and it's like, this is what I have to do at this point. I must go. I must seek the answers.
I think that's so important for people to know too, that the medicine path isn't for everybody. Like it'll call you, just like, if I were to try to tell someone that plant medicine was right for them, that's not my responsibility. We can only share our own experiences, because some people have different experiences with plant medicines. And I think that the medicine is like a teacher, and it has its own soul. It has its own spirit like us. And if we've been following our soul long enough, or where our minds are quiet enough, where we can really listen or kind of like feel the stirrings of our own spirit, then we'll know. Like I remember the first time I was watching a documentary, and this stockbroker was using ibogaine to overcome his addiction to opiates. And I remember that feeling in my chest, like something inside of me was like, that's it. That's my ticket out. That's my medicine, and it was like, that was this stirring of sort of my spirit. The same feeling when I walked into the energy medicine school that day, like there was an inner yes. And I think part of awakening our spirituality is learning to follow that inner yes. Right. When sometimes
the intuition is what, science would call it,
Yeah. And, so much of our human conditioning, which is really like, it's the mind, it's the mentality, kind of like you said, like we create with our imagination. And we also limit ourselves with our imagination.
Absolutely. That's probably the biggest problem that exists out there, is we've been conditioned to believe that our imagination isn't as powerful as it is. Yeah. So one, we don't use it properly, but two, we're using it subconsciously to create the perceived evils and the fears of the world. Yeah. None of them exist unless we imagine them into conscious, a conscious state to begin with. So I think there's a real balance game there.
Absolutely. And most of us don't even know what's lurking in the shadow. We don't even know the unconscious, because it's by definition unconscious, right? So like certain tools like psychedelics, or like breath work, or like meditation, those are like tools that invite our unconsciousness into the light of our own awareness. So then it's like the boogeyman. As soon as you shine a flashlight on it, it loses its power. You've brought it into the light of awareness. Things are scary in the dark. Things are scary when they're in the shadow. But as soon as you shine your light on them, they lose that. They lose a little bit of that fear.
It's what Neville Goddard. I've been preparing for my interview with Josiah Brandt later today, but Neville Goddard teaches, the act of renunciation, which is resisting evil versus renouncing it. Instead of, like you said, shining a flashlight on it, it disappears. We have to see things as if they do not exist. We have to believe and imagine them into not affecting us, not, don't ignore it as much as just it holds no power. It's there, but it is not in my realm of reality, is the way I like to look at it.
Like we
that
empower
comes into my mind, triggers a response, an emotion. I think instantly to myself, I recognize it. What is it there for? And then I tell myself, that's okay. It has no power. It exists in another infinite dimension. That's happening somewhere else, but not in this current reality I choose to be in. It's not there. So I basically just evaporate them as they come into my mind. At least I try to.
Isn't that the definition of awakening right there? Is like becoming conscious of what you will give your power to, whether it's a thought or a person or a behavior or an action. We come into consciousness when we realize we choose our life experience. We choose our perceptions of reality. We are very powerful beings, but we have to come into awareness of that, right? And that it happens in its own time when we decide what we want for ourselves and for our lives,
Very well said. It all comes down to choice and free will at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Something I want to go back to real quick, and then I want to really start breaking down the book here. You mentioned early on, you came from a place of suffering, but you said not everybody has to go through this in order to awaken. Not everybody has to go through the suffering. Joy can do it as well. How do you find, I feel that suffering has such a strong power, and because it ties into our emotions. So it has such a strong emotional power on us that it can jumpstart an awakening so much faster. Everybody has some kind of perceived trauma, whether they want to remember it or not. Something has happened. It's implanted in our mind. Trying to go back and remember it, trying to see it for what it was, is hard for a lot of people. So maybe that's why the awakening we're experiencing, one, it's happening so quickly now, but it's taken so long to get there because people haven't understood the power that joy has. It's only been the ones that have dared to go down the path of diving into the suffering, diving into the traumas, that it's igniting something in us. But now we're able to share with the rest of the world that it doesn't have to just be that suffering. If you want to do it quick, go get deep into the shit and really, screw yourself up as far as the healing goes, when you realize
suffering can totally fast track you back to spirit if you're willing. It can also just suck for the people who don't learn from it. Some people get stuck in their suffering and then they claim the victim. I think people who use suffering as a catalyst are willing to say, okay, what is this teaching me? Like, what am I learning from this? What is this experience all about? And sometimes pain can show up.
I got goosebumps. The energy's coming in, just hearing what you said there. That was amazing.
Thank you. I think we call them truth bumps, right? Like when something resonates with the soul, the part of us that's capable of its own lie detection, right? When the truth just resonates with the soul, something in us, and the truth is going to be different for everybody, right? Because all of our consciousness is different. We're all vibrating at different frequencies, so you and I, we have like very similar truths. We believe similar things. And sometimes it's nice to have someone like resonate with, like, say something really, yeah, I believe that in my core, I believe that in my soul. I believe that suffering can be a catalyst for great awakening, and then we can help other people accelerate their process of awakening by, instead of resisting against our pain, instead of resisting our own suffering, how do we use it? How do we use it as fuel for growth? And I think one of the most powerful things about suffering is it forces us to be present with if we use it for awakening, I should say, if we're using it for awakening, it forces us to be present with what's actually happening and our role in it. Sometimes suffering shows up as like unexpected loss or a diagnosis, or like instantly our lives change and we weren't in control of it. And that can cause people to wake up too, because all of a sudden things are different. We can't be unconscious anymore. We can't live our lives automatically on autopilot, just reacting to life in sort of this, like, this sleepy state. Sometimes things wake us up And I think the pandemic did that for a lot of people, because all of a sudden the pattern was interrupted. People couldn't just wake up to their alarm call, like wake up to their alarm, shower, brush their teeth, go to work, not really think about things. They're just on this hamster wheel of reactivity.
Right.
All of a sudden, life changed instantly, and not by our choosing. And so the people who had already begun awakening, usually because, you know, they already had their dark night of the soul, they're like, oh, I've been here before. Let's so people,
I can peel back the layers so much easier now, where I think it was such a blessing. You know, when we look back at what's happened, it was that jolt, it was that catalyst that we needed. Those that were awakened or beginning to awaken, it sped, you know, it just rocketed us into this. But those who have been the majority that have been asleep to the power, you know, it made them, one, it made them question, but two, and more beneficial, I feel like it gave everybody all this time at that point to choose. I could read some books, or I can binge watch Netflix. I can improve myself, or I can get drunk every night because I'm quarantined at home. You know, we can't leave the house. So it was really that idea of free will, that people had this opportunity now to become better, to awaken more, to learn more, or like you said, to stay the same, kind of just continue living on that hamster wheel, subconsciously just going through the motions. So yeah, I see it as a blessing in disguise. And I think it will be, you know, viewed in years to come, looking back on it like, thank you for that experience.
It's ultimately our choice, right? Like anything that happens outside of us, we don't get to control what happens outside of us. We always get to control how we respond to it. And then that creates the outcome of our experience. Right.
Which then imprints that into your emotional, you know, into your emotional memory, which then creates that, you know, anytime you're triggered, whatever, it's like you can respond positively, you can respond negatively, but that subconscious mind's like, which way do I go here? So yeah, you're right. The way we perceive it, the way we implant it, I guess, into our minds means everything in terms of how the future is going to work out, how the present moment of reality actually plays itself out.
We always get the choice. How do I use this moment to expand myself further? Or how it's always like expansion and contraction, right? Do I ball up and defend myself because I believe I'm a victim and life is happening to me? Or do I stay open, and do I stay present, and do I say, okay, how, like, I'm a part of creation, right? Like it's kind of like that separation versus oneness sort of concept, right? Like, am I a part of all of this? Am I somehow influencing all of this? Or am I an isolated entity having a human experience, right? So we get to choose. Do I want to expand myself and flow with this and have an influence with this? Or do I want to like try to protect and defend myself because somehow I believe I'm a victim? I personally choose to believe that I'm a creator of my experience. Being a victim doesn't work for me anymore. Every single time I try on that hat, it doesn't work for me. I always know that I have the power to respond to whatever is happening in my life.
Right. It's that idea of, what is the definition of insanity? Repeating the same thing over and over, victimhood, blaming, beating yourself up, all these things that feel good. Because in our mind, the dopamine, the biochemical reaction, it's like, it's addictive. I want more of it. I want to continue doing that, but we don't realize all we have to do is turn it off, rewire it, reprogram it to feel how we want to feel, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And awakening is like it's coming into spiritual maturity too, right? Like, don't you think playing a victim, it's kind of easy. It's almost like adolescent like in its energy. It's like an adolescent doesn't really want to take responsibility, and human beings, we're kind of in this like adolescent phase, but we have this opportunity right now to come into this sort of like this spiritual maturity. Like the child in us is like, it kind of resists taking responsibility because it it's easier to play the victim. It is easier.
It is. It is. I mean, in terms of how do you view easy? Repeating
Exactly.
another 25,000, 75,000 year cycle of coming back to have to do this all over again to learn the lesson. That seems very hard. And I'm not wanting to go down that path. I choose to believe that the easier path is this awakening. And then we don't have to repeat it. We get to see what's next. I talk a lot about how what we're experiencing right now is, it's like we're in our senior year of high school and we're literally on the last final exam right now. And the way I've come to look at it and view everybody else in the world is, there's a lot of people in my class that are graduating with me, but there's also a ton of people that are juniors and sophomores. Some are just freshmen. They're just starting this journey. And there's I now have compassion when I look at them. When I look at people that aren't quite there yet in one way or another. If you were a senior in high school, would you be upset that the freshman doesn't know calculus? It's not, he hasn't been taught it yet. It's just, they have to evolve. They're coming. So I look at everything like, I love them. I appreciate them for what they can teach me. And it's just, in time, they'll get there. But it's, not everybody's going to make this jump, whatever that may mean, in your view of what happens next, I guess. But
I do believe that the more people like us who are on the planet doing the work to come into higher consciousness, to invite in those parts of ourselves that maybe we don't see, and sort of to expand our awareness and develop spiritual maturity, because we are all one. The whole of humanity feels that ripple effect in some way, whether they are aware of it or not. The more individuals who do the work, the more momentum is added to the collective awakening. And I do believe that's why we see such a massive awakening taking place on the planet, is because there are so many people doing the work. There are so many
more
people.
tinglies coming, so.
Yeah, the truth bumps. There are so many people who they understand now that the suffering that is caused by the belief in our separation it's a price too great to pay. And the liberation of living from your soul, making that deciding factor to say, I'm going to be true to myself. I am going to follow my bliss. I'm going to figure out who I am and why I'm here and what lights me up. And I do believe that the pandemic, that was like a silver lining in the pandemic, is so many people became face to face with their own mortality. This possibility that, wow, like life is really short and I might only have it for a little bit. That uncertainty, that being in the unknown, those first few months of 2020 where everything was so unstable and uncertain, I think people started saying, well, what do I really want? Like, what do I want while I'm here? What lights me up? Do I want to spend time with my family? Do I want to write a book? What are my goals? What's inside my soul? And the people who really experienced a lot of pain and suffering in the past, they may have been asking those questions already, so they might have just had a little bit of a jump start. And we've had so many spiritual masters and spiritual teachers who have been telling us this, and now maybe
thousands and thousands of years dating back, that these certain truths have been there. They've just been clouded kind of in parables and stories, and one set of beliefs manipulated the writings, the teachings for certain means, I guess, so it's like they've always been there. It's just been, could we seek and find the truth and read between the lines of what it really means? So I think that was a perfect segue into the new book that just came out, Heal the People, Expanding Human Consciousness for a Global Awakening. So can you first just kind of give us an overview, brief overview of the book, the general idea, the general purpose of it, and then we can definitely go much deeper the last half of the show here and kind of pull out some really meaningful, ideas that you talk about and techniques, things like that. So I'd love to hear, what's the overview? What is this book intended to do?
Yeah, so the book is really about mastering your energy to master your life. So there are fundamental levels of human consciousness, right? Like we all have a body, we all have emotions, we all desire to be powerful, to take action on our lives. And then there starts to be these higher ideals of, it's like compassion and forgiveness and connection and unity. And then there's creativity and intuition and this connection to divinity, right? Like these are all kind of archetypal to the human experience. And our ancient yogic masters knew about this 5,000 years ago when they recorded the chakra system, in the Vedic literature. And so the book kind of outlines these fundamental levels of consciousness and how do we awaken to them and how do we integrate them into our experience, right? So like, how do we master the body, right? Like, it's kind of, I consider the book is sort of like it's like a map for how to human at every level.
I look at the Bible in a lot of ways. I look at nearly all of the religious texts that we have. They're instruction manuals. If you can understand how to read them, they're literally instruction manuals for living the human experience.
Yes, but they can, those sacred scriptures can be hard to decipher, right? Because like you said, there's metaphors and we really have to, there leaves a lot of room for interpretation. And so I think humans, especially at this stage where we expect this sort of like instant gratification and we want what we want right when we want it, people are kind of lazy. So you almost have to
think.
Right. Exactly. You almost have to just kind of like give it to them straight. Like, hey, this is how you human. You've got a body. This is how you got to take care of it. If you want it to work, like if you have a car, you know exactly what you need to do to keep that thing running and in good order. Yeah. Same thing with being a human, right? So we kind of need the map. And I think if there are enough people who really accept with reverence what it means to be human and like how sacred of an experience it actually is and how powerful it can be if we're conscious and embodied and integrated, and we are incredibly powerful beings if we're firing on all cylinders, right? So the book teaches us how to do that. It breaks down all of those levels. And so there's also a really critical piece in it about character, like character structure, right? So there's different types of people in the world. There's people who are meant to lead, who just naturally have this ability to show up and inspire others. And then there's people who get behind them and support their mission. And there's people who feel deeply, who just love, and they just love in a way that makes everybody feel just seen and understood. And then there's people who are meant to achieve greatness. They're super organized and they're super structured. And we all have these soul qualities. And the thing is, if we know which quality we have and which quality we are, it makes being ourselves effortless. It's just this flow. When our energy is flowing through us, we just are who we are. We're present in our lives. We're inspired. We're passionate. And we're lit up. But when we're defended, when we're trying to be someone else's quality, or we're confused as to who we are, or we're really just got a lot of our energy invested in protecting ourselves from being hurt, our energy isn't really able to flow through us. So there's a lot of that information in the book, as well as sort of like, well, how do I defend myself energetically based off these qualities? It's a little bit tricky to explain, but it's laid out systematically.
But that's what the book's for, right?
Exactly.
To really walk you through. I think that's where the setbacks I've had, in writing my book has been, what's the logical steps? Like, how do I guide somebody through my awakening and through my understanding of it? And what I've learned, what's the logical steps like you're talking about? Like if you just try and tell somebody, open the middle of the book and start reading it, they're going to be like, what the hell is this? Versus, what is that logical step to to explain it in a way that makes such sense to people that they can implement it. You know, I think I read that it took you about 10 years to write this, right? Which, you know, I wanted to talk about that because at the time you started writing it versus the last 2-3 years, a lot has changed, you know, in the human consciousness, that collective, you know, the awareness to our true power. You know, it's starting to evolve so quickly. You know, did that help you finish the book, obviously, or did it take you in a whole different direction? You know, the first 8 years you're really working on it, and then the last couple you're hit with the world we're in right now, and it's like, you know, different worlds you were living in.
It's almost uncanny. Had I released the book 5 years ago, it wouldn't have made as much sense as it does right now. Right. So because we have just gone through a massive global pattern interrupt. Every single person was forced into initiation, whether they're willing to see it that way or not. You know, so I was writing because the content never changed. The structure, I did get better at.
The principles, the things you teach never change, but people's, I guess, understanding and awareness of what you're talking about, their consciousness rose so quickly. Now it made it to why I can only imagine you were like, oh, this is going to be easy to complete now because I don't have to try and break it down. I don't have to hit people over the head with what I'm teaching because so many people have now awoken to this truth.
Yeah. And so many people are really suffering and they don't know why. And it's because they're sort of like the safe, predictable world is now doesn't feel so safe and predictable. But I also, again, I see a silver lining because normally people look to things outside of themselves to reinforce the ego, right? Control, structure. I can rely on the outside world being what I think it is.
Right.
But 2020 invited in a new consciousness where all of a sudden the world outside of us is entirely different. So we can no longer rely on the world outside of us to create a sense of security inside. So that gave rise to a spiritual awakening. I mean, I have a wellness center and I can't even tell you how many people have recently come in and because they're having this awakening and they don't know why, they just know that something inside of them is looking for peace. And the thing is, we can't look outside anymore. We can't go to our habits and our routines and our behaviors because they're different now. Everything about our world is different.
And so, I think you hit on such a important aspect there that so many people are going through this. They don't know what they're going through. They don't know what they're experiencing, but they know they're experiencing it. So it's so important that people understand, you know, there's nothing wrong with you. Like, this is part of the plan. And it's now time, when you start having those thoughts, when you start questioning the world and the reality we thought it was, it's time to start seeking the answers. Reading books like what you have, watching shows like this, you know, seeking out authors, you know, self-development, whatever it is, at whatever phase they're at. But once that happens, it's kind of our responsibility personally for each of us to be like, okay, something's happening. I need to dig a little deeper. And it's people like you, it's people like me, it's people like, you know, Brian Scott, Josiah Brandt, all of us working together. Find who works for you, find who resonates with you. We're all speaking about the same general, you know, principles. Just some people might like the way you describe it better than the way I describe it, or better than the way someone else describes it. But we're all teaching the same principles. Wouldn't you agree?
I think we're speaking from our souls, right? Like, we're teaching from the level of the soul, and the people who are awakening will continue to find, like, it's vibrational, like attracts like. We happen to be on a path that's like, I want to feel good about what I'm creating. I want to feel uplifted and positive and curious and all of these, you know, these ideals for myself and my life. We are like, it's like the creative idealist. It's sort of like connected spiritually, and we're going to find like minds who inspire us. And then we put ourselves out there so people who are looking for what we have can find us. And that's the beauty. I think those are the beauties of having this technology too. It's also what's making this global awakening more possible than it ever was before, because we had those little moments of, the enlightenments in the past where we had these small collectives who really got it, who said, oh my God, our consciousness is creating our reality. What we think about, we feel about, we broadcast, we bring about. We are powerful creators, but we couldn't share content back then the way that we can right now. We're on like different sides of the country, but here we are at the same time having this conversation. Right. We are blessed with every single thing we need to bring about a global awakening. Now the question remains, is humanity ready to shift? Is humanity ready to awaken and become spiritually mature beings and look at everything and say, I can contribute to the betterment of humanity? Because we could easily stick our heads back in the sand and pretend that, right?
Like pretend that nothing's happening, go on about our existence. You talk about in the book, and I think that was a perfect, way to go into this, is the power, what we're experiencing right now in terms of our human liberation. Explain what is happening and explain the idea that humanity is being liberated. Liberated from who? From what?
Personally, I think we're being liberated from the unconsciousness of our lower chakras, right? So the human part of us that believes that we're separate has really driven the bus for a while. And it's this idea that we're limited, right? The human, because by definition, the human being kind of is limited in a sense. It's isolated. It believes it's separate. But the spiritual part of us is unlimited. It's limitless. It's infinite. It's the part of us that is forever, will always be, right? So we're having this merging instead of it being polarized of sort of like, well, am I a human or am I a spirit? We're merging into the heart space, which can integrate both. We are both. And as limitless human beings, we are very powerful in what we can do in our world.
I agree.
If we only believe in our humanness, then we're limited in our ability to make change. Right. And right now, if you look at the current state of our world, the changes that we would need to make to turn this ship around almost seem insurmountable. Like the pollution and the economy and just like the food and the education, like all of these systems. If you believe that you're just one person and you're a limited, isolated physical entity, then you're going to be like, well, I can't do anything about this. This is way bigger than me. But if you believe that you are an infinite spiritual being with limitless creative potential, and you can connect with other limitless spiritual beings, then we are incredibly powerful. And the more of us who get together and collaborate and inspire each other, our consciousness changes everything. Our human is just the vehicle for our consciousnness to move through.
It's transforming that energy, the energy that's whirling around the earth at all times. It's warm, it's cold, and we're shifting, we're all warming up and we're melting, that energy that used to exist there. I think I love what you said though, in the idea of, are we ready to experience the reality, of our subconscious, like what we actually live in? And it made me think, I had to look it up real quick. I think Brian Scott's latest video yesterday was where to find heaven. And I listened to it, and it was like, there was a point in it that was just like mind blowing, because it said, the fact is we're already in heaven. We're standing in heaven right now. We're just looking out. Imagine looking out through a window, and all we're seeing, all we're choosing to see is the perception of the reality that we're in, but that's not real. It doesn't exist. we're already standing in heaven. All we have to do is simply turn around and be present in it, as opposed to acting like it doesn't exist and believing what I'm witnessing in front of me is real. And it's like, that's the biggest block I think humanity has, is they believe. So we've been programmed to believe that what we're seeing is real, when all we really have to do is just simply turn around and awaken and be present in where we're actually at.
Our perceptions can limit, like they can limit us, or they can liberate us. If you know, we get to choose our perceptions. And I do think that if you look at the world stage is an aspect of the shadow. It's coming into consciousness, right? So like what we saw in 2020 with all the riots and all of this like systemic oppression, and these things are real. These have been stuffed into the collective shadow of humanity, and because we've refused to look at them, just because you don't look at the shadow doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Right? We have to be willing to look at this collective creation and really allow it into our consciousness, but not give it power. Right?
That's the key, right? I like to say I tell people I'm the only one that exists. You're the only one that exists. You know, everybody is separate and living their own individual experience of the universe. However, we're all energetically here connected, and we're adding to that conscious collective, and together this is the darkness. This is the collective consciousness that we all are creating simultaneously to awaken us, to expose ourselves to the truth. And it's, you know, it's not just me, it's not just you, it's all of us harnessing that together. And that's the frequency we're living in right now.
And that's what Bruce Lipton says too. He says, if you look out into our world, you know, he says, like, quantum physics says that like our consciousness is creating our reality, right? And he says, well, if you look around reality and you say, well, geez, look at all this chaos, and look at all these riots, and look at all this suffering, and look at all this illness. Why would I be creating this? And he says, we're creating this so we can look and say, I got to stop creating.
I don't want to do this anymore. I want to get off the train.
Yeah, so that's like, maybe just like we had talked about earlier, that suffering can be a catalyst to awakening. Maybe, and you know, the first page in Heal the People, it says, you know, when all the broken-hearted people living in the world agree, there will be an answer. Let it be. And the Beatles, it's like, how much suffering until we say enough? How much pain?
It's very powerful of a thought, you know?
Yeah, and maybe this has been a catalyst for many to finally say enough.
You said it, are we ready? You asked the question, are we ready? You said you hope that we're ready. I don't think there's any hoping. It's happening. We better just buckle up and be on board, because nothing can stop what's coming. It's already been ignited. Are we ready? We better be, or else it's going to be a very confusing, maybe even scary, I would say, world for a lot of people, you know, really quickly. So there can't be enough of us right now to shine this truth, to shine our light, to just stand firm as a safe place for people to come to, you know, to understand that there's really nothing to fear. The only thing to fear is the imagination that creates the fear in the first place. It's like, there's no death, there's no birth. We're just infinite. We're here. Enjoy the human experience. And that's what you talk about in the book. You know, we're living this human experience. I mentioned it in my opening video. You know, we're here living this human experience. What is the human experience?
Yeah, and what do we want it to be, right? Like, if we know that this is a temporary experience, the ego would want us to believe that this is it, this is all there is, and we better take it super seriously and try to cling on to it and make it permanent. But we know it's not. This is a temporary experience. How do we want to experience it? Do we want to experience it defending ourselves from pain and trying to protect ourselves from the unknown? Or do we want to spend it curious and lit up and passionate and excited and inspired and on purpose? Like, I know for myself, I feel so liberated when I'm with people who are like, they feel really good about what they're doing in the world. And I know that sometimes I can feel really weighed down by people who see themselves as being a victim. So we get to choose, who do you want to be around? How do you want to feel? That's the power of free will. Right.
And I think, there's a lot to be said about that, surrounding yourself with the right people, the right mindset, it changes everything. But I've learned that allowing ourselves to separate from those that we don't resonate with, as much as we love them, as much as we care about them, sometimes we have to let them go because it's holding us back. And at the end of the day, they might change, they'll either choose to become what you want to see them become, or they won't, but you still don't have any control over it. You can only imagine for them happiness or awakening or peace within them. But if they're not willing to change, then they're going to remain there. So I find that those energies will weed themselves out when they're no longer necessary for our development. We have to get over that fear of loss, fear of losing them, and that potential connection. When we're willing to give it all up, that's when it comes back to us easier and more abundant. So it's that fear, it's that perception of lack, that fear of not having it or losing it is so powerful on our reality and on our how we choose to move forward. And it keeps most people stuck in quicksand. They can't get out because of that fear, and it doesn't even exist.
We limit ourselves. If we cling to our limitations, if we argue for them, then we get to keep them, and it's just, we have the key to set ourselves free. Like, if you look at, I'm a big fan of a student of the tarot, and there's, like the devil card, right? The chains don't really bind the humans. The humans can liberate themselves of chains at any time, right? We can free ourselves of fear at any time. The choice is ultimately ours, but it doesn't come without doing the work of looking at our fear in the eyes.
Yes.
And having the spirit be more powerful than the fear. Fear is just a demon, right? And if you look at a demon in the eyes and you see it, and you know that the power of your spirit is infinitely more powerful, it just
disintegrates. It no longer has any power over you.
Yes.
And I think that's where the biggest manipulative, tool that's been used up on us. Did I say that right? Used up on us has been fear. That projection of fear. If you can't watch television without terrible, horrible things constantly just, and it's just all going into that subconscious mind. And now that's the reality we're living in. That's the reality we're creating. It's just a perpetual creation of shit, more or less, because of what we're allowing in. And we have to shut it out. We have to turn it off. We have to no longer allow it to have that power, that control over us. They know it, and we are learning it and waking up to it. So yes, it's an amazing time we're living in. Last kind of before we wrap up here, I want to ask one more question about the idea that we each have our own unique spirit, and that this power we have within us, you write, it's a transformational power that has the ability to create any reality we desire. Explain how we're each unique. Explain how we each have the ability to create our own version of the universe any which way we choose it to be.
So we are the universe. That's the ultimate truth, is we're not separate from it. We literally are it. And We knew this when we were children. Children do not define themselves as a body. There's no concept in a child's mind that says like, oh, I'm too big or too small or too short or too, they are just alive. They are the universe expressing itself in human form. Their energy exists far beyond the parameters of their physical form, and they are exuberant because their energy is coming from something greater than them, and it's animating them. The same thing that animates flowers and fruit trees and animals, it animates. It's the animating principle. Call it consciousness, call it energy, call it God. It is meant to flow through us and unobstructed, right? And when we allow that, we are authentic. We are just ourselves. We're not a body, we're not a face. We are life expressing itself through the temporary experience of our human. But what happens is we learn to restrict that life force energy in order to be something, to be someone, to claim this form. And so we limit that creative potential. We don't know that we're doing it. It's an unconscious domestication, right? So what the map that's laid out in Heal the People is to help us liberate all of those blocks, like learn how we inherited them. How did we learn to, because no one blocked our system for us. We blocked it.
We purposefully did it to come here and learn, right? Yes.
And so we could unlearn, right?
Yes.
Like it's part of the human experience.
Right. I call it the remembering. We are in this process of remembering. Some are remembering faster than others, but eventually everyone will remember who and what we are.
That's it.
And it's just a matter of time. I can't recommend people to get your book and get their hands on this and just disseminate this information. This is eternal truth. This is eternal wisdom. It is fact. It is the reality in which we live in. And you are waking people up with every turn of the page here to our true power, to our true ability. Thank you so much, Kristin, for what you're doing. It's never been needed more than right now. So how can people find your book? And I know my big question is it available on Audible or, Amazon, anything like that? Because I'm an audiobook guy. I did just shy of 200 books I read in 2020. And, I'm just always pumping it in and I can't get enough of it. So I love paperback too, but I know for me, being able to listen to it, rewind it, listen to it again, what was that part? So yeah, I love it. So tell us where we can find your book, how we can order it.
It's going to be recorded for Audible. I'm in the process of doing that now. So
is it going to be your voice or are you hiring somebody?
I think I'm just going to do it myself. So I'm doing all the research right now and figuring out, okay, what is the recording? How do I edit it? So I'm kind of like I like to do a lot of things myself. So it will be on Amazon. It's not right yet. Give it maybe another 2 weeks and then you can search Heal the People or my name on Amazon. Right now it's available for pre-order at Stillwater. If you can just put I'll
put the link and everything in the description box below for people to get a hold of it, get their pre-order. I know I'm going to pre-order it for sure. Love to, maybe I'll send it to you for an autograph.
I would be happy to sign it for you.
So, all right, now it's time for one last thing. Where can people find you? Social media? Do you have YouTube? Where can they find you at?
Yeah, so Facebook, Kristin Fraizer Johnston, and I also have a website. It's www.quantumhw.com. They can swing by my wellness center. I'm in Seekonk, Mass. Shoot me a message.
And I'll have all that info down below in the comments as well, again, our description box. So, all right, it's time for the last question I ask every guest that comes on the show. And since this show is about creating your own reality, if I could snap my fingers right now, and you could appear in the reality you most desire, where would you be? What would you be doing? How would your reality look to you?
That's such a beautiful question. Well, everybody would remember their sacred connection to our planet. So we would celebrate this incredible planet that we're on. We would eat real food. We would drink clean water. We would sing, we would dance, we would create, we would make art. Life would be sacred again. And everybody would remember that being human is a sacred right. And we would respect it and we would honor all of life. The people would be healed and the planet would be healed. My utopia would be heal the people to heal the planet. That would be my creation.
Beautiful. Basically, you're talking about the transition into the new Earth, the new 5-dimensional, 5th density, however you want to look at it. That is also, my reality that I am projecting out there, because I can't wait for it to arrive. We just have to
already
keep
here.
going. It's here.
Already
we just have
here.
to align those frequencies to actually see it. So grateful. This has been an amazing show. You've shared so much with the audience. I hope this resonated. I hope this really hit home with a lot of people. I hope they all of you go out and buy this book. You have to get this book. It will unlock the secrets for you. So I want to thank you so much, Kristin, for coming on and joining me today. Truly fascinating. Best of luck. And I also want to thank everybody that took the time to watch this video. If you like this interview, please make sure to hit the thumbs up button, share it with your friends, with your community if it resonated with you. And if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, click it. That way you'll be notified of any future episodes. Right now they come out weekly. So I've got videos, I've got interviews. Subscribe and you won't miss a beat. So until next time, thanks again for watching. Stay blessed and remember to ask yourself, what reality are you choosing to create today? Bye now.